Okay, welcome back to part 2 of my Warhammer 40K hobby series for my digital portfolio. Once again, this is to kind of elaborate on my hobby, which I think is the skill I'm most proud of, although maybe not the most marketable skill, which is painting Warhammer 40K figurines. So in the last video, we talked about how to go from sprue to model through clipping and shaving pieces and gluing it together. And then we talked briefly about painting with an airbrush and a regular brush. Another guy I'd like to show off here is this guy, which you saw as the header of the blog post. This guy is called the Lord of Change. Pretty nasty looking fellow here. We were talking about basic airbrush mechanics on the last video, maybe starting in bigger pieces and then getting the base layers on and then gluing it at the end once you've been able to paint some of these smaller details. As you can see with this guy, one of the techniques I did is when I first started painting him, I did a sort of pink magenta airbrush from the bottom up, and then a very bright blue airbrush from the top down, and then followed those same hues across the wings here. But then that kind of gives this sort of nice purple magenta shadow in his creases that I think complements the blue really nicely. But that's this sucker here. You can see these big green areas where the color really pops. That was also airbrush. But then obviously these smaller details are too small for an airbrush. So like all the gold bits were painted by hand. The little highlights on the feathers. The face all has to be done by hand. So the eyes, let me see if I can get this thing to focus. Maybe. The eyes, the tongue, all that's painted by hand. Here's two smaller guys here. These are more realistic scales for Warhammer. These are still actually quite large. I'm showing off all my really big, pretty models today. But some of the models can be as small as, yay high. These guys are just a little bit larger because I think they read on camera better and they're more fun to show off. So these two nasty guys, they are demon princes. So one has wings, one has no wings. So a lot of different palettes I've kind of played with so far. We've had this sort of darker black palette here on Be'lakor. We've got this nice bright blue palette here on the Lord of Change. And then I went for a green kind of sickly looking palette on this guy. Pretty gnarly. And then I kind of went with a almost an albino palette, a white skin with these sort of red, orange, heated tones right there at the end, which I thought worked really well for this guy. And then this was also my first time trying to paint a glowing weapon here. So this was intended to look like hot metal. So that was definitely a learning process, trying to figure out what colors to use, how generous to be with those colors, and just kind of, playing around and having fun, making plenty of mistakes and learning as you go. But the end product, I think, was something that reads pretty well on camera and in person. I've got 3 more here to show you. This next guy is another big, sickly looking green guy here. This is the Great Unclean One. So this is supposed to be a herald of disease and plague. And so that's why he looks especially nasty. You've sort of got all these open wounds and cankerous scars, if you will, covering his body. But then, of course, he's got this absolutely wicked smile because he's right where he wants to be, being the herald of kind of doom and gloom and plague. So pretty disgusting model, but I think I wrote about it in my blog post. It's so impressive the amount of detail Games Workshop can get into these models nowadays. When I played as a kid, the models were much simpler looking. It was still an injection mold process to build these, but developments in engineering software like CAD, etc., and then machine CNC milling has allowed for the plates that these models are inject mold created into to just be able to take on much higher levels of detail. One of my favorite things on this guy is you can see this little guy tagging along up front. This guy kind of riding on the stomach there. So you can see the big gross dude here, and then he's got this little sort of helper right here that's holding this sort of smoky incense, if you will. I don't know if you can see that. And then even this guy down here, this was an option that came with the kit, but this little guy being squashed down here under the bulk of this guy. So pretty cool. And I'm kind of going a little bit over time here, so I'll do these last two simultaneously. We've got Angron here. And then this guy is called a Bloodthirster. So really sort of horrible names and sculpts for these guys. They really look evil looking, but I found that oftentimes these sort of evil, wicked monsters are the most fun to paint. They've got kind of all these fun details where there's skin and armor and bones and sharp objects and fire and all these different things you kind of have to consider, you know, what palettes you're going to choose and how you're going to paint them. Where some of the humans in this game are a little more straightforward and simple. So from a painting standpoint, sometimes a little less interesting to paint. These big scary monsters are an absolute blast. This one here, Angron, this is actually who I painted most recently. So I would like to say this is probably the best model I have painted. Each of these takes anywhere from 30 to 100 hours to complete, start to finish. And even though I get better, the time it takes continues to increase as I try out new techniques and, you know, whatnot. This sword here, if you'll see, another glowing sword, similar to what we had earlier, but just a slightly different technique I tried out on this guy. But yeah, I absolutely love it, and I think I spoke about it in my blog post. I think it's so incredibly important to have healthy hobbies outside of work that are unrelated to work. You know, not just like working out or hanging out with your family. You've got to have something to sort of commit your passion and time and energy into outside of your work obligations, where you'll get burnt out. And this is what I've found to be a healthy hobby, and as a bonus, it's technology free. I need a light source, but other than that, that's about it. Everything else is just paintbrushes, you know, my two hands, good paintbrushes preferably, and I guess an airbrush. This is probably as technologically advanced as we get when it comes to painting. So it's a great way to kind of disconnect and unwind, and it can be pretty therapeutic for me. Anyways, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.